they didn't think I'd do that. You hear the walkie-talkie, they're saying something, I'm not waiting to listen. I'm just kind of slowly jogging out. Then there's another security guard in front of me who's like trying to like block my way. I fake left, go right, then I just start running.
That is professional card counter Spartan. We're going to get back to the rest of that Backoff story here in just a minute. But first off, welcome back to my channel. This is A1 Blackjack, the channel where I teach you how to count cards fast. So if that sounds good to you, stick around, because a couple months ago, I was actually able to go out to Vegas and interview Spartan. And I sat down with him and I was able to glean just tons of information from him. I filmed it, and so I think you can maybe gain some information too by watching this interview, all right? This is different than some of my other Tip Tuesday videos where I take just a few minutes and kind of teach you something about the game of blackjack or counting cards. This is going to be more kind of podcast style. And so maybe you want to stick this on in the background while you're working or mowing the yard or whatever you got to do, okay? Maybe listen to a few minutes here, a few minutes there. Come back to it, listen to it again, because there's just tons and tons of information kind of packed into this little interview that I did with him. So I think you're going to like it. And without further ado, I'm going to send it over to myself out in Vegas, and let's get into this interview. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I am here with Spartan, who is a real-life professional card counter. Is that how you would describe yourself, Spartan?
Yeah, to my friends.
To your friends, okay. So we're going to do a little interview with him. He's going to tell us some things about just kind of his experience playing blackjack, how he maybe got into it, and then maybe some tips and tricks along the way that hopefully we can gain some information about. And I'm really excited for this. I hope you are too.
No, stoked, totally. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you. So first off, just a quick question, maybe tell us kind of who you are and maybe what made you interested in card counting from when you were growing up till now.
Well, just a normal, everyday guy who decided that a regular corporate office was just not for me. So I found a different way to earn a living and became a card counter since 2015. So that's almost 10 years now. I've been a solo card counter. I've partnered with another person. I've formed teams, bankrolled other people, and then through the larger network of Blackjack Apprenticeship, became a private training coach, both one-on-one and at the BJA boot camps.
Awesome. And so you mentioned that the kind of the office job wasn't quite for you. I believe you graduated with an engineering degree?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay. So did like the math behind that help at all, or?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I was not remotely interested in engineering, not in the slightest. It was something that I felt like I did because I was expected to have a technical background, and it was just something that I chose. And I'm one of those guys that kind of went through life going with the flow and not really thinking about what I wanted to do or where my talents lied, and just thought I'd figure it out some other day.
Gotcha.
And ended up graduating and, sitting in that cubicle, understanding finally the work that I was going to do for potentially the rest of my life, and decided, yeah, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe if it was a smaller startup, maybe it was something that I was passionate about, but that was my problem. I spent 4 to 5 years on a degree that I don't care about cars. Not at all. Not the inner workings of it. It just gets me from point A to point B. So, I definitely really quickly decided to start looking for a different way to earn money.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned you weren't too passionate about that, but at the same time, you're just kind of going with the flow. I would assume it was kind of the exact opposite when it came to card counting. It's not just a go with the flow thing, and you are passionate about it. So kind of tell us maybe, how did you take that passion and use that to train in the beginning?
Oh, yeah. So card counting, it was something that clicked and made sense to me immediately. When I listed out, I know somewhere in my journal, when I was trying to think of ways to get out of my current situation without having to go back to school, I had a number of different ideas. Some of them were more ridiculous than card counting. Thinking about joining multi-level organizations like Amway.
Oh.
Or yeah, I took a look at that. Definitely, I tried that out for a season. Um, tried to start an online business through Amazon drop shipping and buying and selling goods on eBay. I mean, a lot of different things that I was looking into. And one of those things that I saw that I wrote but not really actively considered was playing blackjack and counting cards. I think poker was on there too.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about either of them except that there were people that beat it professionally. But I ended up one night watching a movie on Netflix called Rounders. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, with was it Matt Damon?
Damon.
Yeah, Matt Damon. And it was a poker movie. And then immediately when that was done, up next was the documentary called Holy Rollers. And that was about a Christian card counting team. And it was on deck to go next. I think I was like washing dishes at that point or doing something with my hands that I just let it play. So it wasn't something I sought out. It kind of just appeared. And I was hooked from that documentary. And that kind of showcased the adventures and stories of the church team. And, one of the managers, Colin Jones, went off to make a Blackjack apprenticeship. And I believe towards the end of the video, they even had a mention of their website. So I looked it up. I took out a deck of cards, flipped them through one by one, and I, used the high-low system, 2 through 6, +1, 7, 8, 9, neutral, tens and aces, -1. Went through it very slowly, and then again and again, and I think within like 30 minutes to the first hour, like I was already ignoring the neutrals.
Nice. Yeah.
And at that point I was like, oh, this is possible. And all the ideas that I had for kind of just what kind of intelligence level and how difficult it was went out the window when I realized it's just simple arithmetic and building a motor reflex.
Gotcha. So flipping through a deck of cards is one thing, but then tell us maybe a little about your early training. Besides flipping through a deck, how did you train and know that you could maybe go to a casino and attempt this?
Well, I didn't graduate with a very good GPA in engineering because I just didn't care and I didn't put in the work. So my starting salary as a starting design engineer wasn't very high. That being said, I was pretty tight on money and I was trying to look for the cheapest option possible. I knew there were resources out there, such as Blackjack Apprenticeship, that had memberships to train, but I decided to go scour the internet for whatever free resources that I could find. And honestly, everything there is free to learn how to count cards. And I chanced upon a source called, it was blackjackinfo.com. They had some online course that was just free. It might still be there. I haven't checked. But they kind of went over, I think it was like 21 chapters with little homework assignments at the end of it.
Nice.
And just went through that. And then I found a DVD called Beating Blackjack with Andy Block. He was one of the MIT, the iterations after the MIT team that split. But have you seen that documentary at all?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nice. And then did you just go right away to the casinos, or?
No, it was about, so I started training April of 2015.
Okay.
And it wasn't until April, May, June of 2015, so 2 months later, that I went to the casino to attempt to count cards. So during those 2 months of training, I memorized basic strategy and played some, I just used a free app that I found, and started, playing blackjack with basic strategy. But I realized that that app wasn't really helping me, because it would, at the top of the cards, it would tell me what my total was
Oh, yeah.
all the time. So I relied on that to, instead of adding up my hands, and I'd just be counting, trying to count the cards. Definitely focus more on the counting aspect, which I think for most players, that's the more intriguing part. And the most, that's the thing that they want to know whether they can do or not.
Yeah.
Basic strategy is just boring. I mean, it's just memorizing a chart. So it's one of those things where if I am training somebody from the ground up, I actually do the reverse of what most people do with training, which is to teach basic strategy. I actually teach them how to count first. That way they're a little bit more excited to learn basic strategy after they got counting down. Yeah, got the counting, the basic strategy down. I was using Norm's CV Blackjack Variance. That app, which had like good, I don't know, I like the graphics and the animation and the customizations that you could use with that. So towards that point, I think I started shelling out when I realized I needed more tools. But the bread and butter, most of everything that I did for training was using a physical deck of cards, actual chips, felt, and playing the hands out in front of me. Right. So once I felt like I had my training down, the first time I went to a casino was in July of 2015. It was Soaring Eagle in Michigan. And I went and I just I didn't bet anything. I just wanted to back count the table to see if I could do it. What I found out was that, because I really didn't have any experience in an actual casino. I went to casino maybe like 3 times, 4 times at most in college. Played blackjack. First time I went, I won $100. The second time I lost $100. Third time I lost $100. And I think I lost $100 again one more time. And I was like, this is dumb. I'm not doing this. And that was it. So I didn't really have any experience with casinos. So when I was trying to count, I totally disregarded the fact that, how slow the games were with other people playing. And the side bets that they're doing, and how slow they are to make their decisions, and how slow some dealers are paying out. And I would frequently lose the count, back counting, because I was training, quite quickly at that point, which is much easier to like kind of reinforce that count in your head. So I went back home, learned from that, and started integrating more distractions and more breaks in between the rounds, dealing slower, so that I could competently count in a casino. And that took up till September of 2015 before I officially started playing, withdrew, I think, $2,000. And started playing with that.
Gotcha. So nice. So after playing for a little bit, then I believe you met somebody who kind of taught you a few things about your game to refine it. And also it was about then when you met someone else who was a counter that you realized this idea of networking was so important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was at this point, and this is roughly September of 2015, I finally shelled out a membership to Blackjack Apprenticeship because I wanted to connect with other card counters. I was already starting to play and kind of dealing with the things that counters deal with, and I wanted to talk to other people about it. I don't quite remember Who approached who? I think I put out some, introductory message on the forum saying that I'm from Michigan. And then somebody private messaged me. And this person, he was Levi Mish. And this is the first card counter that I've networked with. And I still think back to like how insane that was, because, and we've talked about this at length, in the fact that like had our paths not crossed then, it still would have crossed at some point, because either one of us independently, once we got that taste of blackjack and counting, like we were hooked. And we were going to be traveling and meeting other people, and just our natural personalities, like we would have connected in one way or another. So I think it's so interesting, and that the fates had us meet each other for the first time, and that had a huge impact on who I am as a player and how my game is.
Yeah,
absolutely, because I think that dictates, when you meet somebody who kind of doesn't, has a little bit of holes in their game, or, it just, you can't help but kind of fall in line with that other person, or thinking that, the standards are, there, particularly somebody who had been counting for at least a year longer than I had been.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, I mean, this kid was fast. I thought I was good until I met him. And just to give you an illustration, with the single deck countdown drills, I know I say in general, like under 20 is kind of like a professional standard. I'd say under 25 seconds is acceptable.
Sure.
I was averaging like 16, 17 seconds. And I thought that was really good. He was doing 13, 14 seconds.
Wow. Wow, that is fast.
And so when I say negative counts, I say M, as in Mary. So M1, M2, M is in minus actually. M1, M2, M3. And I think I got that from Andy Block's video.
Yeah.
You kind of know where people learned how to count based on what letter they use for their negatives. Levi Mish, he says minus. -1, -2, -3. So he uses 2 syllables, and he still counted faster than me.
Wow, that is incredible.
I mean, the cards would just be flying when he did those countdowns, and the lack of errors in his game. Because like when I counted through, like, and I feel like this is the case for most people who play, who are like within their first, I want to say like 200 hours. I don't know, like every 1 out of 4 6-deck shoes, they'll be off on the running count by 1. And they'll say like, I don't really know why I'm off. Yeah, with Levi Mish, I mean, he just was never off.
Wow.
And it took less than a week for me to just match that because of, my competitive nature. So having him to bounce off of has done just so much for my game ever since. So I have him to thank for that.
Gotcha. So you'd say that kind of if there was a little bit of lackadaisicalness in your game, the fact that he was better and you could tell that just caused you to rise to his level.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't even say that I was lackadaisical. I think
it
was pretty good for in general, but just if I had first met somebody with if the first person I met wasn't Levi Mish, just given the odds, they would likely have had a worse game than I did. And in that particular case, if that happened, I probably would have been content with where my game was at and not really kind of push myself further.
Gotcha.
But the fact that he was just so quick and always better, he was always better. Even now, like he's probably still better without even trying. And that's one of the things that also I didn't mention. He started learning how to count cards when he was 17.
Wow.
I started when I was 24, and I think that really has a huge impact on how quickly you grasp the concepts and just the brain. Just, I don't know, when you're younger, it's just yeah.
So not only was he fast, I believe you also mentioned he's a very high character guy. And when it comes to teammates or just running teams or anything like that, explain and kind of go over the importance of high character.
Yeah, well, this is a 100% cash-based business. We don't create anything. We just move money, physical cash. And we do it playing a game in our minds. So when it comes to what's important in the team, it's trust. And I say that like in a general sense, but trust means a lot of things. Because, you know, you can trust somebody not to steal from you, but do you trust them not to make a mistake or forget? Or do you trust them to be, not be careless with the cash and lose it physically? There's a lot of things that kind of come together with trust. And without that, partnership, team just fails. The moment you start second guessing, I think it's just, there's really no coming back from that. Because then, you know, anything that happens just kind of compounds on that until it finally reaches a critical point where you separate. But thankfully, yeah, with Levi Mish, like that was never an issue.
All right, so I think that was all about 8-9 years ago or so. So then today, walk us through maybe what does a typical day look like for you now in terms of card counting? Maybe like a day where you play and maybe a day where you don't play.
Well, it's been years since I've ever really set an alarm.
Okay.
That's one. I wake up when I want to. Try to get a workout in the morning. I've always found that, you know, going between night and morning, you know, I feel better starting the day with that. And I mean, really, like, it's whatever I want it to be. On days that I'm not working, I like to read a lot. I like to play video games. Like to hang out with people and have good conversations, travel, and write as well. I think writing is one of my biggest passions, so I do a lot of writing. On days that I am working, usually try to get to the casinos when it's busiest. So my weekends are kind of loosely like Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Wednesdays, Thursdays. And my working days start, you know, my work week, if it's a 5-day work week, is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe Monday. And, you know, generally in the evening times, say from, I want to say like 4 p.m. to maybe like 2 a.m. So I kind of shift my sleep schedule in that way so that I still get my 8 hours, because that's pretty important.
Yes, it is. All right, so I'm going to ask you a few questions kind of from when you enter the casino until really even after maybe a couple bets. But first off, a day you play, how do you decide which casino to play that day?
Well, I take a look at my records and see which ones that are kind of, this is all, so Yeah, because there's two different ways that I do this. And also, I guess, answering your previous question, because I was kind of speaking more in terms locally playing, and I do play out of state more too. In the case where I'm playing out of state, my work schedule is kind of like, it's like 2 weeks. I would say I work like 3 weeks out of a month, take 1 week off, kind of in that kind of interval. So I'll take frequent trips. It's one of the reasons why I do love living here in Vegas. It actually isn't because of the casinos here. You know, it's got some of the best games in the country, but it also has the highest back-off rate because of how many card counters they encounter on a daily basis. So yeah, I kind of like to joke that it's kind of like their strip clubs, you know, fun to look at, but you can't really do anything. So take a lot of trips, go and playing other casinos out of state, and here in Vegas, there's a lot of good cheap flights in and out.
So when you go somewhere else, you just kind of play what's available because there's not as much as here.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm out of state, I usually just kind of, I pick one, play it until I'm backed off, and move to the next one. So I have a different kind of approach to that. Whereas here locally, I'm trying not to appear as often because I am local. I think the frequency in the back-offs, if they happen, eventually it's going to get to a point where the staff know me so well that it's just, I can't get any time in it. And so I'm really trying to like space out the times that I am entering any one place in one particular shift.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to ask next, is you probably bounce around a little bit from place to place, but then also you look at your records, like you were saying, if you played the graveyard one night, then, you know, 2-3 weeks later, whenever you come back to that one, you're probably not going to play the same shift. Is that relatively accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
So that's the casinos you're going to play. And then once you enter a casino, I tell my viewers not to just go sit down right away at a blackjack table. Would you agree with that? Should we take a lap around the casino? Should we look for anything in particular? Maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's truth in that.
Okay.
I mean, I think in terms of like whether or not that's going to help you not seem as suspicious, I can't speak to that, but definitely be mindful of how you appear from the eyes in the sky. You know, if you kind of walk particularly quickly straight to a blackjack table as they're shuffling up for a new shoe, that looks out of place. And from a surveillance standpoint, they're looking at a giant kind of, you know, bird's eye view of an entire casino floor. A lot of things are happening, but if one, you know, if you're moving a little bit quicker than the rest, you stand out, and they will be curious. What are you walking towards? What are you noticing? So that's one of those things where, yeah, you want to watch and be careful of that, but also just, you know, appear as a gambler. So maybe it is just kind of walking around and not just scoping out the blackjack tables, but watching a roulette wheel. And, you know, taking part of that action, or maybe with just by spectating.
Maybe looking for other advantage play opportunities.
Perhaps.
when you get there. All right. So you've picked a table at this point, or you picked maybe a section of the casino. What rules? What should we look for before we sit down to play? Specifically speaking to like maybe my audience, who's, I'd say, beginner to intermediate.
All right. This is particularly important on the Las Vegas Strip. Make sure you are playing a 3-2 table.
3-2.
Yep, 3-2. There has been getting progressively worse over the years, and they're taking away 3-2 blackjacks and putting in 6-5. And they will have in the same pit, literally like side by side, one of them is 3-2 and one of them is 6-5. And it's not very apparent. You know, a lot of them, like they'll have their little LCD display on the side. It's not going to say it on the table. It'll give you your table limits, and then like kind of in a banner right underneath scrolling, it'll give you the table rules.
Yeah.
Really
small.
And, you know, offers 3-2 blackjack.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to like stand there and wait a little bit while it's kind of scrolling through. But that is the most important thing to make sure. 3-2 blackjack, and that it's not a blackjack variant, such as blackjack switch or super fun 21.
Push 22.
Yeah.
All those.
Which, you know, like if you're not very experienced and you take a look at those games, they might seem better at a glance. But there's always a catch. To anything that seems advantageous to you, there's something that they take away. And it's almost always worse. I mean, it is always worse.
Yep. So besides the rules there, would you suggest wonging in and out, playing heads up, avoiding negative counts? Talk about any of those other important aspects.
Really depends on your bankroll size.
Okay.
When I had, say, 15 to even like a sub 30K bankroll, your table mins and the ability to wong in and out is of the highest importance. You know, you can't really afford to play even quarter tables at that point. I mean, they have to have really good rules. So with those, you know, smaller bankroll sizes, yes, protect your money and don't pay the rent, because it's just your top bets aren't big enough to compensate for all the negative EV attached to playing on true -2s, -3s, -4s. You know, wong out as early as you can. Even, you know, 6-8 deck games, you know, when it gets to say like true, or, you know, like a running -12, 2 decks in, it's true -2. Just think about how many more low cards need to come out for you to start betting at a positive. And sure, you might get a couple positive rounds out of that at the end, but think about how much rent you're paying in between that. And it's just never worth it. So in those cases, yes. When you start having a larger bankroll, say in like 50, 60K, higher, 6-figure range, min bets stop mattering. And in those cases too, like you can choose to play all if you're in a heads up situation and you don't feel like walking around finding the next best table. Like you can afford it because your top bets are high enough to compensate for that.
Yeah, I would say just make sure you run the numbers first to make sure you can afford it.
Yes.
Yes. Even if you are at a $50,000-$60,000 bankroll.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how much those negatives can eat into your EV. All right, so let's say we've played correctly and we've chosen a good table. We get to kind of what we think might be a stopping point because we're way up. Is that the right way to think about it? I got this question a while back and someone said, well, how much should I be up before I leave? As a card counter, should we think that way, or when should we leave the table?
In this particular case, to answer this person's question, it's when you had enough and you feel tired. Really, it doesn't matter. I think in this particular question, what I'm hearing is a emphasis on the short-term wins and losses, and that is the wrong way of thinking about it, because this is all just to a card counter, it's one long session. That's all it is. So whether you leave early and you pick up back up tomorrow, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, just because you're up a couple units doesn't mean like immediately the next time you come back in that you're just going to lose it all. So why not just lose it all tonight?
Yeah.
And then get to the long run faster.
Yep.
Because it's this game. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you make $100 and then you lose 50, and then you make $100 and you lose 50. But it doesn't happen in that same like pattern. It'd be nice if it did.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's just win 100, win 100, win 100, lose 50, lose 50, lose 50, win 100, win 100, lose 50, lose 50, lose 50, lose 50.
Yeah.
And then forward. So you can't really know when those happen. It's just playing more and more shoes get you closer to your expected EV.
Gotcha. And then, so we leave the table after we are tired and no longer want to play or whatever the case is. And we're going to come back another time to continue that kind of career-long session, if you will. Then once we leave for the night, what would you suggest, again, kind of a beginner to intermediate audience, what record should they write down after playing for a session?
All right. Personally, I would suggest that the date, the casino, the time that they were in the casino, so the start time and the end time. A lot of people, including myself in the beginning, just put the hours and minutes that I played. But I realized that it's very valuable to have the exact time that you were in the casino in the event of something happening, such as a back off, or the opposite of that, just you were able to play. And this matters in higher stakes. Those type of notes are important to know what shift you were playing. So you got that. Then you get your actual result, whether you won or lost, the game that you were playing, double deck, 6 deck, hit 17, double after split, all the rules involved to that, and what you were spreading to or what your expected value was. And then I would add any notes of whether you got backed off, trespassed. Those are good to keep.
Yeah.
And on a separate column, definitely if you are playing at higher stakes, if you CTR, have a cash transactional report. And all that means is it's when you buy in for physical cash for over $10,000, you have to fill out a government form. Those are good to log into your records because in any event where you're audited, those are one of the things that they're going to bring up and have records of. And if they match your personal records, it'll just make the whole process go a little bit smoother.
Nice. All right. So kind of walking us through the whole casino process there. I appreciate that. And then switching gears a little bit, I want to hear maybe one of your best sort of winning or losing stories, and or maybe a back-off story. But here at the end, we are going to save your best back-off story for our Patreon only section of this video. So do you have maybe a winning or a losing story that sticks out to you, or a back-off?
You want a winning and a losing story?
Whatever you want to tell us.
All right. Well, I have a good winning story.
Okay.
This was very early in my career, where I had like less than 2,000 left. And I was, disclaimer, severely overbetting for my bankroll size, or at least what I had. But the story I told myself was that I had a replenishable bankroll because of my job. So I would always be, putting more money into it. So I'd rather play with a little bit higher expected value. And even then it wasn't that great. It was like, somewhere in between 35 to like $50 an hour.
Okay.
Betting two hands of 150.
Oh man.
Anyway, I on weekends I would drive up to Soaring Eagle in Michigan, their casino, because they had Surrender with their 6-deck game. Not very good pen. I mean, it's like 1.5 on average for their 6-deck game. But it was kind of very similar to MGM Detroit, which was my local casino where I played the most. Anyway, I went up there and met up with Levi Mish. We were playing separately at that time. We didn't team up together until after a year that we were independently playing. But we were kind of in conversation and just, we were just friends because we related to one another, and it was fun having somebody else to talk to about this. That night, I lost like $1,800. So I had like $200 left. Was not in a good place.
Yeah.
And Levi Mish actually, he loaned me $2,000 to play the next day.
Wow.
And so I went back the next day, and I didn't even need it because I only bought in for $200 because I just won, and I kept winning all night. I think I played till like, I started playing somewhere early evening and played until like 2, 3, maybe 4 a.m. And it was just one of those sessions where you could not lose. I mean, 2 hands of 150, and I made almost $6,000 that night.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I remember splitting tens in 4 occasions and winning every single one of those. And it was just on fire. I could not lose. I emailed a really long, I still have it. I looked at it recently. There was a long email that I sent to Colin at that time.
Yeah. And
it was just kind of like a play-by-play of every single hand that I won on. This is like 3 paragraphs. And then he replied back like 1 sentence like, great, just remember, short-term wins aren't, I don't remember what he said. Yeah. It was just,
it's not everything.
Yeah.
That's funny. Awesome. That's a great story. So what about, so we're going to save your best Backoff story for Patreon, but what about maybe a second best or one that's maybe memorable?
All right. Well, there was one particular time where when I finally got backed off from MGM Grand, that was my first Backoff. I had gone to Greektown next door, but they had sent my information over.
Oh yeah.
So that was one of my first experiences with a bolo, which is be on the lookout for. So they trespassed me like immediately. Like and Greektown was one of those places where as you walk in through the casino parking ramp that's connected, they have somebody standing at the door scanning your ID. So, not thinking anything of it, gave them my ID. He scanned it. I walked in. I was scoping out their 25-min tables and sat down. And before I got through like 2-3 rounds, had some executive, some suit, walk up and trespass me right there. Yeah, so fast. So fast forward a couple months later, I decided to come back, and I realized that they have a second entrance down from outside the casino, where they don't scan.
Oh man.
Your ID. So I found some outside parking structure away from the casino, walked out and around through there, got inside, and at this point I was teamed up with Levi Mish and a couple other guys. We had a much bigger bankroll and spread, so I was playing in their high limit room, and I think I got a couple hours in it over there. Then, as I was playing, I noticed some suit walking into the high limit pit with a walkie-talkie, and kind of just the body language told me that something was off. And they were standing there, speaking into it, clicking it, and kind of facing their body towards me. Then there was another security with a walkie-talkie that stood direct, like a couple feet, maybe, roughly like, 6 feet, social distancing. Is that what it is, 6 feet?
Yeah.
Behind me. And at that point, I just knew this was about me.
Yeah.
So before I tell you what happened, I think it was either a day prior or maybe even that day. There was Levi Mish was playing in another casino and had it was one that he was trespassed from.
Oh.
And he got caught and he ran out. He didn't wait for them to say anything. So hearing that, I was just like, I wonder what would happen if I did just run. Would they chase me? Would they just let me go? I had to find out.
Oh no.
So I just grabbed my chips, put them in my pocket, and then just started walking very quickly out. And at that point, I distinctly remember, them just start, like, they panicked. They didn't think I'd do that. You hear the walkie-talkie, they're saying something, I'm not waiting to listen. I'm just kind of slowly jogging out. Then there's another security guard in front of me who's like trying to like block my way. I fake left, go right, then I just start running. And I run down the stairs towards the entrance that I came into. One security guy just put his arms out, this big guy, and was blocking me. And I kind of just pressed up against him and was just like, hey, you're touching me. Yeah. Let me go. I want to get out of here.
That's awesome.
And he did.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I ran out of there. And, that's just one of the things about this business. The two things that Blackjack provides for you is money and stories.
Yep.
And I wanted to have a good story.
That was a great story. Oh, that's funny. Oh man. All right. This next question is the one I've been looking forward to you answering the most. And I'm going to give you 4 different aspects of the game. And I want you to order them from 1 being most important to 4 being least important of those 4. They're all important.
Okay.
Right. So first off, we have penetration. Second, it's going to be table rules. Third is number of decks, so double deck, 6 deck, 8 deck. And then lastly is rounds per hour.
All right. From most important to least or least to most?
Yep. Let's go most important of those 4.
Okay. Interestingly, like I wouldn't do the textbook answer here. Although I think in either case, the penetration, I think, is first and foremost.
Really?
That is the most important thing. That's the thing that we all look for. How deep is it cut? And I think there's quantifiable figures to that you can look up.
So wait. Before you say your next one, is that because no matter whether you're a beginner or a professional or anywhere in between?
Oh, yeah, that changes.
The penetration is,
yeah.
It's kind of consistent all the way. Is that your reason?
No, actually, if you have a smaller bankroll, matters a little bit less. It just, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
On a double deck game, playing up to, from 2 hands of 25 to 2 hands of 500 with your EV there. And let's say this double deck game is hit 17, double after split with half a deck cut off. So 26 cards behind the cut card. That EV, which I think is roughly $500 an hour, if you take away 5 more cards from that, and there's 21 cards behind the cut card, that increases your hourly to over $50 an hour.
Wow.
So that's still, I mean, that's what, 20% increase.
Yeah.
Right there. At, with a lower bankroll, I think it changes less, but just with penetration, it's just your risk of ruin dramatically decreases, your N0 decreases. Like it's the first and foremost thing that all card counters gravitate towards. Good pen.
Gotcha.
So, and trying to figure out how to get that.
Got it. So today, 8 years in, you've made plenty, we'll just say that, that keeps your risk incredibly low. 0.00, I'm assuming, probably right now. So
yeah.
And you want to make sure that it stays.
Yeah, much better than like the number of decks. More like, because, if you have a double deck game that's center cut, just right in the middle,
Yep.
I mean, you're better off playing a 6-deck game that is cut a deck or less, and you can quantify that just either through, betting softwares like CVCX or the pro betting software that Blackjack Apprenticeship has. So the number of decks really doesn't matter. I probably put that at the least.
That's fine. All right, so we got 1 and 4. So that leaves us with table rules and rounds per hour. Which one's number 2?
Ooh, I'm struggling with this one. Table rules. I mean, hit 17, stand 17. The difference, stand 17 gives you like a 0.2% more advantage. Having full double, that's a big one. Well, that's like almost 0.5% if you can double any 2 cards.
Sure.
And generally most blackjack games, multi-deck games have that. But then rounds per hour, if you have, that's why I'd put rounds per hour ahead of table rules.
Gotcha. Because you can kind of overcome some of those rules if you're cranking out 2-3 times as many rounds.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's many cases where playing the 6-deck game is better than the double deck game, just because you crank out more rounds per hour, and it also kind of just depends on how many players are at the table as well. A heads-up game, 6-deck, you'll get over 100 rounds per hour with a decently fast dealer, whereas on a double deck game, pitch with 1 extra player, definitely less than 80 rounds per hour, I'd say.
Gotcha. All right, so that's really interesting to me, is hearing the answers to those questions. Like we said, you've been playing for about 8-9 years. After all that time, how do you view money now?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was working a job, there was always a cap to how much you could earn. So I had to budget ahead of time for things if I wanted to, say, upgrade my laptop or go to a particular gym or get, private training, fitness training, or go to therapy. All these things come at a cost, and I had to kind of, if I didn't have the means to get those things, I just didn't do it, because there was no other way for me to make money. I would try to see, like, what could I sell on eBay, try to find, odd things, but there was just no other extra way to work. And there, whether I was working at I served tables, I waited tables in college for about 5 years. I mean, there's only so much extra shifts you can pick up on, or so much good service you can give to increase what you're earning. And same with a job, with overtime. But when you are a card counter, there's no cap.
Yeah.
It's limitless. I mean, it's as much as you want to work. Your office is open 24/7.
Nice.
So from that point forward, I mean, it has its pros and cons. Absolutely. Like, I could make as much as I wanted to. And that's kind of the pitfall that many people do fall into as well, and kind of can't seem to shut off their workaholicism.
Yeah.
And I definitely fell into that because, at first, like, I needed more security. It was all about survival, having a bigger bankroll, more padding so that I could be more comfortable and have a roof over my head, and food, and just, I could go through a month to 3 months of a losing streak and still be okay. And then once I had that, it's just kind of going more and more without realizing what I was aiming for.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so I got one last question for you, Spartan, and that is that you are now here in Vegas and you offer some services to potential card counters. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. I offer one-on-one blackjack training and consulting. With that, that's just anybody who's looking to improve their game, or even learn from the ground up. Whatever stage you're in, I can very quickly figure out where you're at and put up a plan and a curriculum to get you to a winning player. Aside from that, I do offer a Spartan test out experience.
Okay.
And with that, that is geared towards players who believe that they are ready to tackle the casino, or have already been tackling the casinos, and maybe just need that final verification that they do have a winning game. Of course, through a 2-hour session, I can't know for sure whether somebody has a long-term winning game, but through the hundreds of players that I've coached and tested out over the past, I want to say 6-7 years, I've pretty much, I feel like I've identified what the key criterias are and certain benchmarks that need to be met to be a professional, long-term winning advantage player. So with this test out experience, I have actual quantifiable criteria.
Okay.
Each mistake is going to cost a certain value, and you have to be under a certain value to have a passing result. Gotcha. But it will kind of go through different types of games, such as double deck, 6-deck, 8-deck if that's one. It's quite customizable. So depending on what your needs are, if you're kind of just like a full-time road warrior, I would highly advise the standard format so that you're ready for anything. Hit 17, stand 17, surrender. But if you're more of a part-time player and you have a local shop, then we'll just, we'll customize the test out to whatever that is, and that bet spread that you want to have. But it is as close as you can get simulated casino experience.
Yeah.
So it's
I even say it's sometimes maybe a little harder, so you are ready for
it's
from my experience. He tested me out a little bit. So.
I make it a little bit more difficult just to make sure that if you can handle that, you can
Yeah.
more than handle anything that a casino can throw at you. But I
Perfect.
feel like most people underestimate their games and think they're ready much sooner than they really are.
Absolutely.
And I could easily show them without really going overboard on certain tricks or distractions, such as music or light conversation, that you will be off on your count or make more mistakes than you think you would.
Nice.
So that's something I highly recommend to people who feel like they're ready for that, and also for ongoing professionals. I think that's something you should regularly do, is get checked out.
Keep it sharp.
Yep, at least twice a year, but I would recommend quarterly.
Nice. So if people wanted to find that, could you tell us where to go?
Yeah, all that information, including pricing and my availability, is available at spartanblackjack.com.
All right. And we will put that down in the description of this video as well, in case my viewers would like to see that, and I hope they will. But otherwise, we're going to transition now to our Patreon only portion of the video, where Spartan is going to answer a few questions, such as maybe how to improve from a 95% to a 100% card counter. Tell us what he would have wished he knew from the beginning, as well as he's going to give us his best Backoff story. We already heard a good one. He's going to tell us his best. So if you want that link for my Patreon to keep this conversation going, is down in the pinned comment of this video. We hope to see you over there. Thanks again, Spartan.
Thanks a lot.